this bill, so please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think you know this bill very well, better than I do, probably. This is House Bill 169. It's the cotton trailer bill. And really the only difference between this and Senate Bill 28 is we increased the speed limit, the miles per hour, to 70, where the Senate bill had 65. That's basically the only difference between the two.
All right. I don't think there's any questions. So anybody here in support of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169? Anybody here in support? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman. Mark Figgenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau testifying in favor of HB 169. We believe that this bill does a good job updating the definition to changes made in cotton trailers in recent years, and so for those reasons we're in support.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Anybody here else in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169? Hearing none. Anybody here for opposition? Anybody here for informational purposes? Representative, you have any closing comments?
I don't. Let's just get this through and help our cotton farmers out.
Absolutely. Thank you. That will conclude the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169. Next up is House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828. Representative? Is he here? Is he here? Laubinger. Okay, I'll tell you what, then we're just going to skip and we'll go to House Committee Substitute for House Bill 1116. Representative Haden, proceed when you're ready.
Chairman Bean and members of the committee, I'm Representative Kent Haden from Mexico, Missouri, House District 43, which is Callaway, Audrain, and Monroe counties are involved. I bring you today House Bill number 1116, and this is a bill on fencing. This bill was brought to me by a constituent who is also an attorney. Full disclosure, he happens to be my son. So he deals with a lot of property rights and a lot of, unfortunately, a lot of fence lawsuits. And what this bill is, if there's a lot of acronyms or old sayings about fences, good fences make good neighbors. I remember the last fence my dad I helped build, he said, this fence is bull stout and hog tight. And that was 55 years ago. I went by the other day, and it's still standing. So a good fence lasts a long time. Unfortunately, agriculture has changed a lot since that time. And unfortunately, at that time, we knew all our neighbors. The law at that time said that if you met in the middle of the fence, it was on the right, it was your responsibility. On the left was the neighbor. Each one to the right was your responsibility at midpoint. In the several years ago, that was changed because of differences in agriculture. Right now, we have 19 counties that remain with that type where your equal landowners are responsible for the fence. That's what's your county option. The rest of the state is based upon if you have livestock, you have the responsibility to build, maintain the fence. Now, that's the responsibility. The problem is that we have the responsibility, but not the ability. If you have something fall on your fence, particularly a tree, you may have to get on your neighbors to cut it off. That's no problem as long as you're good neighbors and you deal back and forth. Unfortunately, a lot of your neighbors maybe aren't the good neighbors we used to have. Right now, I'm surrounded by 7 landowners, one of which is a railroad, one of which I can't get a hold of. So if something falls on the fence, I need to go on his side to cut it off, I'd actually be trespassing without his permission. So this bill is an attempt to say, okay, we have the responsibility to maintain the fence, but we also have to have the ability. And this allows that if while building and maintaining or repairing a fence, you can get up onto your neighbor up to 10 foot without trespass, up to 10 foot. Now, you can only take trees and brush out on the fence line, and you can't, any damage you do on the neighbors, you'd be responsible. You cannot go in any buildings, and railroads, utilities, and wild animal parks are exempt from these liabilities. Now, the importance to the agricultural people, I'll give you a good example. I mentioned my father, he built a hog-tight, bull stout fence. He actually had a nervous breakdown worrying about that his cows would get out on his neighbors, eat his crop, and they'd take his farm. Now, it led to a mental breakdown. Sad situation, but that's how it worries. I've had the sheriff come to the house 1 o'clock in the morning and say, "Do you have a 5-weight black steer?" Well, yes. He said, "Well, we've had 3 wrecks on the highway down here, and come down and see if it's your calf." Fortunately, it wasn't, but it's a big deal. You have to be able to get these cattle back in, and you have to be able to maintain and build a fence. This is a common sense approach. And again, you don't know all your neighbors anymore, so sometimes you have to do it rapidly before you can ever get a hold of them. So that's the bill in a nutshell. I'd be glad to take any questions.
Any questions for the representative? Senator Curry.
So, like, when you're talking about 10 feet from the property line, I guess?
From the current fence line, the property
Current
line.
fence line, okay.
So-
So then that 10 feet would start right by where a
The fence,
surveyor?
and you could get over on him up to 10 foot.
Okay.
Now, you can only take the brush out on the fence line. But the reason the 10 foot, so much of our equipment, if you're gonna have to dig a new post, particularly put a new fence in, dig a post hole, you have to have, the tractors are big enough that you have to have 10 foot to be able to get the
No, I
post
get
hole
that.
digger down.
So
And-
when you talk about clearing brush along the fence line, what if there's like a really, like a beautiful oak tree or something that's between the fence and the 10-foot mark? Like, could something like that be taken down or like topped or something like that?
It says that it's right on the fence line and top. Now, here's the problem, which, by the way, this doesn't correct. What happens when your fence, your tree, which the
Right.
non-livestock owner, falls on my fence? And we're trying to be as fair as we can on this, but, this bill does not take care of it. That's a problem, because a lot of times a big tree limbs will extend over on a neighbor's property. And unless, that can be a problem. But this bill does
Yeah.
not take care of that.
I wish it did, because that's a problem in my district too,
Well,
where
it's a
like
problem everywhere, and this
feuds
is
break out all the time.
this is only for livestock
Okay.
against the fence.
Yeah.
This is not fence, this is not boundary yards, this is only when you have livestock running against the fence.
Okay.
Not rabbits, I know.
Okay. Well, darn.
Your background was rabbits, and it doesn't include but they're livestock, so I guess it could. But,
Okay.
it is only livestock.
Okay, very good, thank you.
Anybody here in support of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 1116? Please come forward.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, member of the committee, Mark Figgenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau, testifying in favor of HB 1116. Currently, folks with livestock are stuck between having to legally maintain their fence and avoid cattle getting out in liability, and also to avoid the risk of trespassing onto their neighbor's property. In order to do this required maintenance of their fences, this provides a middle ground that gives a buffer for folks to do the work that they're required to do, and also protects their neighbor's property by keeping these fences maintained and avoiding liability of something going and damaging the property due to a poorly maintained fence. I'd be happy to take any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, once again, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of, please come forward.
Mr. Chair, member of the committee, my name is Jacob Knable with Missouri Corn Growers Association. We also would like to go on the record in support of this legislation.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ben Travels with Missouri Soybean Association. I think the representative covered it well, as well the two testifying before me. So happy to answer any questions in addition, though.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, Jeff Reed, Missouri Cattlemen's Association. We testify in support of this bill. As you know, we're from southeast Missouri. There's floods and rivers and all kinds of things that take fences out. So we definitely like to repair those and keep our livestock in.
Had our fair share this year, hadn't we?
Yes, sir.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in favor of. Seeing none,
Cody Atkinson. So I grew up on a cattle operation in Odessa. I managed a bison ranch before being hired on by Humane Society. Fences are obviously important. Being able to maintain those without fear of retribution is also important. I think this is a good bill. Thank you.
any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor of. Seeing none, anybody here in opposition? Seeing none, anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Representative, do you have any final comments?
Now, there are 19 counties that opted to go with the old style where you face the middle of the fence, but they're scattered mainly in northwest Missouri and a few around Truman Lake.
This will conclude the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 1116. Now, next up will be Representative Laubinger for House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828.
Thank you to the committee. I apologize for my tardiness. They needed a quorum in another committee. My name is Becky Laubinger. I'm the representative from District 117. And my House bill is very similar to Senate Bill 67. There are three primary pieces to it. One of them is clarifying the definition of taxpayer related to farming and beginning farmers. This was previously approved and one type of tax-paying farmer was left out. And so this just clarifies all of the definition that should have been there previously. It doesn't change the fiscal note because that group had already been planned for. So this bill addresses that definition clarification. It also aligns our state tax deadline with the federal in case April 15th falls on a weekend and the federal moves it to the following Monday. That this is just putting in statute what we already do, but it allows us to automatically align with the federal tax date. And then the third part of it is related to tax credits. When somebody fully qualifies for a tax credit, but the state has hit the cap, there can be penalties and interest assigned to the portion that wasn't paid with taxes. This eliminates the penalties and interest because the taxpayer was unaware of the cap and the gap, and so it allows them to set up a payment plan within 60 days. With the state, those taxes must be paid, but we would not charge penalties and interest on that portion. So I'm open to any questions.
Any questions for the representative? Seeing none, anybody here to testify in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828, please come forward.
All right, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Ben Travelis with the Missouri Soybean Association would like to go on record in support of this legislation. As the representative said, this does fix the beginning farmer technical correction that we discovered in rulemaking process from the legislation a couple years ago. And then also I know I've spoken a few different times before this committee this session about the apportionment issue that different tax credit programs are running into, including the biodiesel tax credit program, and the representative's legislation does address that issue. And so happy to support this legislation. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor, please come forward.
Chair, members of the committee, Jessica Petrie here on behalf of Feeding Missouri. That's the Coalition of Missouri's Food Banks. Specifically, want to thank the sponsor for working on the penalty fix for the food pantry tax credit. It's a really important tax credit to support our food banks and their member pantries, and so we appreciate all the work on fixing this. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony. Next up, in favor, please come forward.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Chuck Pierce, representing the Missouri Society of CPAs. I want to go on record in support of this. Representative did a great job of explaining it. These are all gotchas that are in statute. The only way to fix them is to fix the statute, so be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of. Jacob, you're going to get your chance.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, my name is Jacob Knable with Missouri Corn Growers Association. Would also like to go on the record in support of House Bill 828. Specifically, all I have to offer that's new is specific to the beginning farmer tax deduction piece, just that I have heard from multiple farmers throughout the course of this past summer who were interested in utilizing the beginning farmer program. However, after digging into it a little bit more, realized that they do not meet the requirements, or the landowner doesn't, rather because their farm is structured in the wrong way. So this is a real solution to a very real problem that's out there. With that, be happy to take any questions that you might have.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mike Deering, representing the Missouri Cattlemen's Association, certainly support all components of this legislation from the first sentence to the last sentence. It's just simply common sense legislation. We're most in tune with the beginning farmer language that we initiated with now Secretary of State Denny Hoskins many, many years ago, and then crossed the finish line with Representative Dane Deal, and now thanks to our colleagues at Missouri Soy and other organizations, noticed some deficiencies in that bill, and this is a good fix. Again, common sense, and we would urge support. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness? Thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Mark Feigenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau, testifying in favor of HB 828, and I've got nothing to add.
Any questions for the witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of. Seeing none, anybody here in opposition? Seeing none, anybody here for informational purposes only? Seeing none, Representative, do you have any closing comments?
Just I thank the committee for the opportunity to present this and for your time in listening.
Thank you. This will conclude the hearing on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828. Last but not least is House Committee Substitute for House Bill 489. Representative, whenever you're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I am State Representative Dean Van Schoiack from the 9th District, the counties of Andrew, DeKalb, and Northern Clinton, Missouri's Great Northwest. I thank you for hearing House Committee Substitute for House Bill 489. This bill deals with the process of taking animals that have been neglected and abused, or allegedly neglected and abused, and what happens with them, especially what happens with the people who are not found to be guilty of animal abuse or neglect, how they get their animals back or be made whole. Our law currently is silent on that. And so that's what this bill tries to do. Those of us who've been on Ag Committee in the House for many years have heard this bill, or the versions of this bill many times, but not this version. This is new for this year. First of all, in the first line, we took out duly authorized public health officials being able to get warrants, because our law on warrants requires law enforcement officials or prosecutors to get warrants, not anyone else. So we took that part out. We did include 578.025 as being included in this language. 578.025 deals with dog fighting. So animals that are involved in dog fighting would fall under this as well. The disposition and hearing part's largely the same. It says that they can't have a third party approved by the court hold the animals if the court finds that that's the necessary route to go. Basically, this bill says that animals aren't to be sterilized before the or euthanized before the disposition hearing, and that after disposition hearing, if a person is found by preponderance of evidence that there's likely abuse occurred, which is what the disposition hearing does, then they can post a bond within 72 hours that's satisfactory with the court to keep their animals until the trial, and at which time they would be found either guilty or innocent. And if they're innocent or not tried, not convicted, they get their animals back with no charges due to them, that the confiscating authority would pay the boarding fees and the veterinary fees. Today, we're finding that largely these cases don't go to trial because the boarding fees and veterinary fees are so high that people just give their animals up. It gets to be more than the animal's worth, and they're not made whole, even though they may not have ever been convicted or ever even tried for animal abuse or neglect. And so that's what the crux of this bill does, is it makes those people whole. Again, and so that's basically what we're doing here. It says that the animals that are confiscated, and if the person is found not guilty or is not charged, they get their animals back. All they got to do is demand their animal back. They get it back, and there's no charge to them. The confiscating authority pays for the boarding fees and veterinary fees. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Any questions for the representative? Seeing none, anybody here to testify in favor of House Committee Substitute for House Bill 489?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Tony Duggar, registered lobbyist for the Missouri Pet Breeders Association. We want to go on record in favor of this bill. We appreciate Representative Van Schoiack carrying this bill. We think this just sets out a fair process for the entire process of confiscating an animal, and I think he covered all of those.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Barb York. I am with the Missouri Federation of Animal Owners, and I want to go on record for support of the bill. We want to thank the representative for his work at doing this. We believe that it is only fair that if you are not found guilty, you are not responsible for any bills.
Any
With that, I'll
questions?
answer any questions.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony.
Thank you.
Next up, in favor of.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Mark Figgenbaum with Missouri Farm Bureau, testifying in favor of HB 489, and we just wanted to go on record.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. Next up, in favor of. Seeing none, anybody here in opposition?
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, my name is Bob Baker with the Missouri Alliance for Animal Legislation. And we are opposed to this bill because this bill does the exact opposite of what the bill is intended to do, and that is help innocent animal owners. Right now, that there are two trials, and just to give you a little history, I know you all heard this bill many, many years, but right now, under the new law that was passed in 1993, there are two trials to decide what happens. One trial is the civil trial to decide what happens to the animals, and that's where all property disputes are heard. And then there's the criminal trial to determine what happens to the owner. And it's worked extremely well. There's been no problems over the many, many years. I think it's like 32 years now it's been in effect, and there's been no problems whatsoever. And it really helps the innocent animal owner. And I want to stress that the original sponsor of the current law was the cattleman himself. And he did it to help protect innocent animal owners. And the reason why is, if you have to wait for a criminal trial, it could take you a year or so to be able to get your animals back. And by having a civil trial within 30 days, and most of them are done within 20 days, you have a chance to go into court and reclaim your animals and argue that they were innocent. And the problem is, while the sponsor claims that this bill improves the disposition process, it actually eliminates it. And I don't think they realize that. Because what they do is, they're giving the authority to make final disposition of those animals to the criminal trial. If you look at Section 6 of this bill, it states that there must be a criminal conviction before those animals can be permanently removed. And the problem with that is it takes away all the authority of the judge at the civil trial. Because if the animals comes in, say the state comes in and proves that those animals were in fact abused or neglected, the court cannot order those animals permanently taken away from the owner. They have to wait for the criminal trial. But conversely, and what innocent animal owners ought to be worried about, if the court finds that those animals were not abused or neglected, they cannot make a permanent disposition of those animals and give those animals back, because now the state will hold those animals as evidence until the criminal trial. So it completely destroys the process, and I don't think they understand it. I think one of the things they're confused about is the definition of disposition. In legal terms, disposition means a final judgment or a resolution of a legal case by a court of law. So this isn't a temporary ruling, this is a permanent thing. And if it ends up that the criminal judge has to make that decision, the judge at the civil court cannot make that decision, and it's meaningless. In fact, this bill the language in this bill was discussed at the Missouri Bar Association. And a judge stood up and he said, there's some serious constitutional issue with this language, because what you're doing is, as busy as we are in the courts right now, you're forcing a judge to have a trial in their courtroom, but they cannot render a judgment. He's turning these things into a moot court. And so this totally does not help innocent animal owners whatsoever. And I used to own racehorses for many years. The last thing I would want is to have my animals taken away from me, and I have to wait for a year to get them back. And you have to realize, I mean, it's not just stressful to lose your pet. If these animals are commercial animals or agricultural animals, it's affecting your livelihood by making you force a year to get them back. I think the other big confusion is because it's referred to as a disposition hearing, that they actually think it's some type of informal hearing. It's an actual civil trial where the court must prove, again, the burden's on the court or the state to prove with the preponderance of the evidence that those animals have in fact been abused or neglected. It's a regular civil trial. It's not just some type of hearing. And I think that's the confusion. We hear this all the time about innocent animal owners losing their animals. Well, there has to be a decision in a criminal court before that happens. And, you know, the Court of Appeals has made a ruling on this, and I just want to read this into the record because the first two sponsors of this bill were both attorneys. They had no idea that the Court of Appeals stepped in and ruled how this must be enforced. And when they realized it, they did not go forward with the bill. And what the appeals court said is that referring to taking away someone's property, such as their animals, is a very strong action. However, so that's why they said the statutory predicate for such strong action is a finding of abuse or neglect. So this is a finding at an actual court. And I don't think they realize that this is actually a court trial, rather it's a regular informal hearing. We've heard from the sponsor in the House saying that it does not provide due process, that civil trials don't provide due process. I mean, all property disputes, malpractice suits, divorces, everything, those are all handled in civil courts. And as far as the constitutionality of this, the Missouri Court of Appeals in a unanimous ruling found that it was constitutional. They stated, quote, as discussed above, the statute implies the sufficiently clear terms of animal abuse and animal neglect to justify impoundment, requires a hearing for immediate disposition of the animals, and permits an animal owner to prevent the disposition of the impounded animal. What the statute does is grant the circuit courts the discretion necessary to evaluate the innumerable scenarios under which an animal abuse or neglect case may arise. Section 578.018 provides the circuit courts with sufficient guidance to avoid arbitrary and discriminatory application. So I think this is due to a lot of misunderstandings. I mean, one of the irony things in here is if you look at the bill, it changes the finding at the disposition hearing to likely abused or neglected. And that is not what the court says. It has to be. I think we covered most of this. The other thing that was brought up, that people are found innocent and they still have to pay the cost of care. Again, that's great confusion on their part. There's another section of law that covers that. It's in 430.165, so that if the court rules that those animals should not have been impounded, there is no abuse or neglect, they do not have to pay. And that has never happened. I mean, they claim that this happened, but there is no evidence that that has ever happened. As I said, there's another provision in law that covers that. And again, this has been in effect for 32 years, this law. They have yet to come up with any instance where an innocent animal owner lost their animals. They have come up with cases every year, but there's no truth to them whatsoever. They're either embellished, or in some cases they were totally made up, fabricated. And so why are we changing the law when it's worked so well. It protects the innocent animal owner best, it protects the animals, and it protects the municipalities and counties for having to pay for the cost of care for so long to those animals. Thank you.
Any questions for the witness? Senator McCurry?
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. So I've been in office, I think, 12 years, and I've heard this bill or, some version of it for the entire time I've been here. It seems like some in the industry that's supporting the bill, it seems like there's a lot of confusion. And so, and every year we do this where you and other people come in and talk about, court, Court of Appeals things, Supreme Court things, things that are hard for people like us to access. Have we ever tried to just rewrite this so that it's in English and people actually understand? Because I feel like for 12 years, this is just what we do. And I feel like have we ever tried to write it in clearer terms?
Yes, that's an excellent question. And you're absolutely right. The current law is written, could have been clearer. And that's why the Court of Appeals stepped in and stated how it must be enforced. And I don't think most of the people are aware of that Court of Appeal decision. In fact, the first two sponsors of this bill were attorneys, and they both told me later on that they had no idea about the Court of Appeals ruling and they'd misinterpreted the current law and they didn't go forward. The last sponsor in the House last year did not go forward with the bill when he realized that. The last sponsor in the Senate did not go forward after they realized this. And so when Senator Munzlinger was the chair of the Agriculture Committee several years ago, he tried to reach a consensus and say, we understand the law is confusing, there might be misinterpretation, let's sit down and work it out and protect the innocent animal owners so these allegations never happen, and yet it's fair to the municipalities and counties. And he and his chief of staff, I know, spent a couple weeks working on this, going back and forth with everybody. They finally wrote something that was great, it protected everybody, and the proponents walked away. So this has been tried, and the thing is, there's just no truth to this. I think in some cases they just don't understand it, but in other cases I think it's more than that. But I'll leave it at that.
All right. I know it's asking a lot, but would you have a way to have access to what that compromise was back in whenever Senator Munzlinger was in the Senate? Because I would love to see that and see if, I'm just quite frankly tired of this bill.
Sure. Yeah, I'll dig it up.
Okay,
someplace.
very good.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely.
you. Thanks.
Any further questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for testimony. We're going to take just a second break here and get a quorum. Kyle, would you please call the roll?
Senators Dean.
Here.
Berger. Here. Bernsketter. Crawford. Here. Gregory. McCreary. Washington.
We do have a quorum, and just for everybody to know, we are going to have an executive session right after this. I think there was one witness that wanted to testify in favor of this bill, and they were getting up, so I'm going to ask them to come forward if they still want to come forward and testify in favor, and then we'll go back to opposed.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Members of the committee, Jeff Reed, President of Missouri Cattlemen's Association. We would testify in support of this bill.
Any questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. Now, opposition.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. My name is Katie Barnett. I'm an attorney, Barnett Law Office, licensed in Kansas and Missouri. I'm a Missouri State grad and teach at the University of Missouri Kansas City School of Law, where I teach animal law. I specialize in disposition hearings like this that we're talking about, so I'm happy to answer any questions that you have. I think that the reason for this process is simple. Living evidence is expensive for your counties to deal with. Your animal shelters, your counties, sheriff's department, that's who bears the cost when these animals are held. Then recouping that cost from the defendant is next to impossible. So for 3 animals held for about a year, costs about $34,000. For a county, rural county, that's a lot of money. That doesn't have a line item, and so that's one of the reasons for this process. I've brought a few orders so you understand that this is an actual trial where actual evidence is presented. I'm often hired as a special prosecutor, and this process, this disposition process, is so very similar to how I would prosecute a case. In this case that I've brought, there were several animals that were seized, and veterinarian was up there testifying. Law enforcement officer who executed the warrant testified to each and every single animal, whether or not it was likely to be abused, whether or not they met the preponderance of the evidence that that animal was neglected or abused. That's what this entire order is. And so to say that this isn't fair or that this process doesn't encompass, due process is just insane, because I've been a part of these for the last 12 years. So there's plenty of information. I mean, first, you have to have an investigation that leads a law enforcement officer to have probable cause to seek a warrant. Then you have to have a prosecutor go over that and ensure there's probable cause to submit to the judge. Then you have to have a judge review that warrant to ensure that there's enough there to get to approve the warrant. Then you have, depending on the number of animals seized, law enforcement post notice. There are several of these type of statutes throughout the country. Kansas, for instance, isn't nearly as stringent as Missouri. You already have a good process in place that people understand, that has been executed and been executed efficiently. And so to me, this bill is highly unnecessary as a practitioner of law. And then I just have two very big problems with the way that this is worded. The first section is section 2. Currently, daily charges for boarding must be posted for 30 days. That's easy to figure out. You have $10 a day per animal for 30 days. That's $300 per animal. There's nothing in here about that. How much are they supposed to post? How much bond are they supposed to post? It doesn't say. An indefinite amount. And then it says retail amount. Do you know the difference between what your local veterinarian in rural Missouri charges for a daily boarding rate versus a retail boarding facility? You're talking about $10 per day for an animal shelter or your local vet clinic to board the animal versus a retail rate, which is an upwards of $45 to $60 a day. Now you're just costing the county more money. For what purpose? It doesn't make any sense to me as someone who deals with this every day. And then the no animal owner can afford what's in this bill, quite frankly. If you think that no animal owner can afford what's in it, what our current statute says, there's no way that an animal owner can afford a retail cost of an indefinite amount of time. So this bill is doing the exact opposite of what I think it purports to do. And then the other procedural issue in section 6, which I believe Mr. Baker already discussed, is that it requires a bond be posted to cover the cost of care, again, at a retail rate. Current language does not require 30 days cost of care prior to the end of the criminal case. It doesn't. They have a choice. If someone wants to surrender their animal, they should be able to, and if someone wants to keep it, then they can post cost of care. Living evidence is different. That's why we have this. It costs the counties money. So I am in strong opposition of this. Our shelters and your vet clinics, where you don't have shelters, will be full of animals seized in animal cruelty cases with nothing to do with them.
Any questions for this witness? Senator McCreary.
Good afternoon. Thank you for being here. I had no idea there was an area of law dealing with animal law, so that's really cool. So one of the things you said that caught my attention, because I don't think I've heard it in the last dozen years hearing this bill, is that living evidence is different. So so I'm thinking through like a typical case, there might be drugs or guns as evidence. Like you can lock them up in a box and they're locked up until the trial.
Vehicles.
Yes, things like that. But with living evidence, it's different, and that's where the cost is going to come in. So how is this handled? Like if it's like 3 horses, they obviously aren't going to be boarded at a animal shelter, at least the kind of animal shelter I think of, versus, if it's dogs or cats or something, that are a companion animal being held at a county shelter or municipal shelter. how would that be handled from a cost perspective?
So what's really interesting is livestock and horses can often be seized in place.
Okay.
We're not going to move 10 horses to an animal shelter unless that there's a landowner or an equine specialist who is willing to take that many horses.
Okay.
So they could be moved over there, and then they would incur a separate daily boarding rate. Again, your counties don't have a budget for this.
Okay.
What happens is often counties don't have a budget for it, and they're afraid to execute a warrant to seize a large animal. That has happened many times. And then oftentimes they can be seized in place, and then there's no cost of care. It's only the cost of care that is borne by the animal owner. So if you're seizing 20 head of cattle in place, then the animal owner cares for it. There's nothing to post.
Okay. And then what about the scenario where, like I'm in St. Louis County, our animal shelter, the county animal shelter is in perpetual, like it's full perpetually, unfortunately. So what happens if there's dogs and cats in that shelter? What happens to other animals that are like brought in and that kind of thing? So how does that work logistically?
So say you have an animal shelter that holds 10 dogs or 100 dogs, and you are constantly at capacity, as you said, and then you bring in 15 dogs from a dogfighting case. You have plenty of evidence to indicate dogfighting. The animals have wounds consistent with dogfighting. You have all kinds of social media posts about dogfighting. You're ready to execute that warrant. You've impounded those animals. Now you're holding 10 dogs in a shelter that holds 100. You have to hold them, according to this proposed language in the bill, indefinitely. That means for years. What happens when you need 10 more spaces for dogs from dog bites or dog attacks or other cases or owner surrenders or strays?
Right.
The dogs that have been there that are owned by the animal shelter get euthanized because you have to have space. That's just the fact of the matter.
Okay.
So healthy adoptable animals get euthanized to make room for these animals that must be held indefinitely. That's one of the reasons for the time period that was eliminated by this bill. It says you must post 30 days cost of care. The hearing must be done in 30 days. It's to move things along. It's to make space. It's so animals aren't euthanized for no reason.
Very good. Thank you for
Yep.
clarification.
Any other questions for this witness? Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Next up in opposition.
Cody Atkinson, Humane World for Animals, organization formerly known as Humane Society of the United States, testifying in opposition. So as has been noted, this language has been around for 32 years. It's worked successfully for 32 years. There is yet to be a case brought up in my 4 years in this position, or I believe the previous 8 years before that, that has a case number, any lawyers attached to it, any names, any address, in which this has been an issue and necessary to change. However, just last week, Cedar County did one of these disposition hearings and found that 51 animals were being abused or neglected. That happened very quickly. They are now able to get those animals spayed, neutered, and adopted, clear out that space. There's a reason we have this. It's to move things along very quickly and still provide a trial. Last year, there was this mystery case that we tried to investigate out of Marshall, Missouri, claims that the city of Marshall, Missouri, took these animals in, brought them into the shelter, was intentionally starving these animals so they could win the disposition hearing case and allegedly make a bunch of money for the city of Marshall or the animal shelter or what have you. We can't find it. No names were given. Again, no lawyers were given, no judges, no nothing. To sound like the Wendy's commercial, where's the beef? There's nothing here. There's no reason to be changing this process in a way that is going to keep animals in abused and neglectful situations. I strongly, strongly encourage you to oppose this bill. Thank you.
Any questions for this witness, Mr. McCreary?
Clarification. So when you talked about that Cedar County case, there were 51 animals that had been found to be abused. So the owner would have been
Alive, 51 alive. There were skeletal remains of other animals.
Okay. But all that happened within 30 days?
Correct, yes.
Okay.
It was just April 22nd was the
Okay.
hearing, so.
Okay, thank you.
Further questions? Senator Berger?
When you talk about the Cedar County issue, who consumed the cost for that?
what cost was consumed for that, or who consumed
So
the cost?
I'm not entirely sure. I would assume at this point it is likely the county who's had to pay for it. It seems unlikely, given the situation that these animals were found in, that the owner was able to afford care. But hopefully the county is able to go after that individual for cost of care.
Even the spay and neuter costs, that's covered by the county also?
Yes, sir.
Was this dogs and cats, or?
It's dogs and cats. There was a horse, I believe, involved, and again, some skeletal remains found on the property. What had happened is we have the Missouri Department of Agriculture goes out and inspects these licensed operations. They found pretty egregious situation and decided to recommend it for removal of the animals. So, well, I can send you a link to the case. It's pretty gruesome.
Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you.
Any other questions for this witness? Seeing none, thank you for your testimony. We're going to take a quick break because I need to do an executive session, and we will come back to this bill. I now make a motion we move into executive session. Do I have a second? Have a second. All in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. We're in executive session. I now make a motion we take up House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169 by Representative Brown, which we just heard. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. This is House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169 is for the committee. I now make a motion to vote House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169 out of committee. Do pass. Do you have a second?
Second.
Any discussion? This was once again the cotton trailer bill. that we
Just
are-
a quick point of clarification, because I'm getting my cotton trailer bills mixed up. Is this a clean version? This doesn't have things dealing with vehicle inspections and things like that? So this is the clean one? Yes. Okay, very good, thank you.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, Kyle, please call the roll.
Senators Dean.
Aye.
Berger. Aye. Bernstetter. Crawford. Gregory. Aye. McCreary. Aye. Washington.
By your vote of 5-0, House Committee Substitute for House Bill 169 is voted out of committee. Do pass. I now make a motion to take up House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828, which we also just heard. Do I have a second? Second. Have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828 is before the committee. I now make a motion to vote House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828 out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Kyle, please call the roll. Or Anna, please call the roll.
Bean.
Aye.
Berger.
Aye.
Bernstetter. Crawford. Gregory. Aye. McCreary. Aye. Washington.
Okay, so by your vote of 5-0, House Committee Substitute for House Bill 828 is voted out of committee. Do pass. Next up, I make a motion to take up Senate Bill 760 relating to the sale of wood products, sponsored by Vice Chairman Berger, which we had heard a couple weeks ago. Do I have a second?
Second.
I have a second. All those in favor, please say aye. Aye. All those opposed, nay. Motion carries. Senate Bill 760 is for the committee. I now make a motion to vote Senate Bill 760 out of committee. Do pass. Do I have a second?
Second.
Have a second. Any discussion? Hearing none. Anna, please call the roll.
Bean.
Aye.
Berger.
Aye.
Bernstetter. Crawford. Gregory. Aye. McCreary. Aye. Washington.
So by your vote of 5-0, Senate Bill 760 is voted out of committee. Do pass. I now make a motion we move out of executive session. Do I have a second?
Second.
We are out of executive session. So we are back on House Committee Substitute for House Bill 489. Anybody in opposition, please come forward.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman,
Please
members,
proceed.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, I'm Richard McIntosh. I'm here on behalf of the Alliance for, the ALDF. Anyway, what I've handed to you is a chart, a flow chart that actually shows the animal disposition process. We talked about a lot of the process. It is confusing in statute. I'd be happy to sit down with the sponsor over the summer and go through the process and find out what in this process they believe is an actual problem. I do think that it's worth cleaning up the statute to make it easier for the common person to read. I have asked Senator Nick Shore, and he's requested 10 years' worth of data on all the animal disposition cases statewide, so we can start talking about the actual facts of what has occurred in court versus the allegations in the stories. This is not a hard process. We can figure this out, and we can see exactly what has taken place, and if there are reasons to fix the process, then let's have an adult conversation about it. This bill has gone on for 14-plus years. It is time for everyone to sit down and just go through this and be done with it once and for all. The process works pretty well. I don't think there's a problem. My son is a prosecutor. He handles the animal abuse cases, and I can tell you from his caseload, they are not taking animal abuse cases so they can take animals away from innocent people. When you read the cases of the animals that are going through the civil disposition process and then a decision whether they take those to trial criminally, these are not cases anybody sitting in this room would like to sit and listen to. They're fairly horrific, to be honest with you. So with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions, and I just think that it's time to be done with this once and for all.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of this witness? Senator McQuarrie.
So I found my notes from, I guess, 2019 or 20 when I was over in the House, and we had looked up under 578.018, which would have been like a way to look for any cases opened under that chapter, and there was nothing found in that year. So is that the main place that those would show up?
I think so.
Okay.
But that's why I've asked for the state
Okay.
court administrators to go through and give us a
Yeah.
complete look to see what is actually there.
Okay, I would love to see that information as well.
Everybody will, and I hope somebody will take me up on going through this summer, and let's just getting down to the bottom of it.
Happy to help.
Well, thank you. I think we do need a couple representatives and senators on there, along with maybe somebody, a prosecutor. I am not volunteering my son. He is not volunteering. He's not volunteered. I cannot voluntold him.
Right.
So, but someone else, and then if the folks who are in favor would like to sit down in favor of the bill and have the discussion, then let's go do that.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Anyone else to testify in opposition, please come forwards.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, Senator McCreary. It's great to be with you. Chris Ropey, I am here on behalf of the City of Independence, and I'll just make a few quick, brief points that I don't think have been mentioned. How the process works and the changes that would be made. I would just say this for a lot of our larger urban areas. I don't think that this is necessarily a problem. I'm not aware of anything that we've heard back in our community in Independence that there's an issue that needs to be resolved, but this would make us change our current process, which actually does work in a pretty expedited manner. We have our animal control department is quite capable of dealing with these cases. We do it quickly with our municipal courts, having to go through circuit court, especially in Jackson County. That's very tedious and time consuming, and taking law enforcement off the street when we have 100 miles of federal, state, and local highways that we have to patrol to go deal with something that currently our animal control department can handle no problem. Would just like for you to consider maybe a carve out if you do want to go forward with doing something different or make changes to the process, but would appreciate your consideration of that carve out for maybe our larger, we're the 5th largest city in the state, so maybe for your larger communities that have a good, strong animal control department to deal with this. Appreciate your time. Be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions of this witness? Senator McQuarrie.
Thank you for bringing that up, because I do remember in years past hearing from the county that I live in, we have a perpetual shortage of law enforcement officers, and so that change on, at the very beginning of 578.018, saying that can only be a law enforcement officer. We have animal control officers that are trained, and this is what they do. And so, it would be hard for me to explain that I'm redirecting officers on something like that when we have an entire department of people that's what their job is. So thank you for bringing that up.
Anyone else to testify in opposition to? Anyone for informational purposes only? That concludes the hearing on House Committee substitute for House Bill 489. Any closing remarks, Representative?
Yes, if I may, yeah. Sure. I'd like for you to take note of Who's testifying on which side? We have agriculture and animal interest on this side for animal production, and we've got HSUS and trial lawyers who make money off of this current law on the other side. We've heard a lot from the people against here, a lot that, boy, I'll tell you, I still go back to the one thing about the warrants. Our law does say to get a warrant, you need to be a law enforcement officer or a prosecutor. Most animal control people are not law enforcement officers. They're animal control people trained by animal rights groups. They're not post-certified and duly authorized to be law enforcement officers. And I think that's something we certainly need to take a look at here. There is a problem, or we wouldn't be bringing this up. We've brought it up year after year. The changes we've made in this bill, I think, are fair and address the issues that have been found in the past. They can say we don't have people going to court. Yeah, we don't have people going to court because they give up their animals because they can't afford to pay the boarding bills. The veterinarians don't get paid under our current law. Our current law is insufficient in this regard. I thank you all for your time very much.
Representative, thank you for your testimony. No further business coming before the committee. I make a motion to adjourn. Do I have a second? Second. All in favor say aye. The ayes have it. We are adjourned.
Well, I wish I could do things like that.
I don't know if Tracy